in Dallas, we do kind of have a subset of TEI that works with personal injury lawyers. It's where how I got into marketing. It's something that I kind of keep close to home because I really wanted to be a lawyer, and now I love telling lawyers what to do. I get a sick pleasure out of it. But we were in Dallas recently for one of our fabulous and lovely personal injury clients, and we went down a very insightful conversation on billboards. And I wanted to start kind of the podcast on billboards because I think that they're one of the most effective uses of marketing that really plays to the psychology. And they've been kind of poo-pooed on for the last few years because of the rise of digital and how expensive billboards were and how difficult it was to tie an ROI, return on investment, to a billboard.
Yeah, I push back, like maybe amongst some marketing biz graduates, but billboards work. Like if they didn't work, nobody would be investing as much money in it. And the biggest personal injury law firm in the United States has the most billboards.
Well,
so they
I
work.
think it's more, the argument isn't when you're McDonald's. You know, like McDonald's has never let go of their traditional ad spend, or like a Morgan and Morgan. Yeah. But when you're like a medium-sized business that doesn't have a big ad budget and you're deciding where to place your dollars, a lot of businesses were swayed to go more into the AdWord route than to allocate dollars on a billboard because it seemed more attractive to get business online than it was to put in like an outdated or an old modality. And that's kind of where I think there was a shift away from billboards. But in working with lawyers and seeing how, and not even just lawyers, like in working with businesses and seeing how businesses look at a holistic marketing budget, I see a lot of businesses that could really benefit from billboards pushing back when we propose it because they can't quantify an ROI. They can't get a data report in the same way, and it doesn't feel as tangible. But what's funny is that these same business owners will look to, will signal or say who the biggest is in their market because they have a billboard. And there's an underlying psychology of size and relevance that humans place on traditional marketing that is worth talking about today.
Because like billboards are, I think you need nuance and context to get into why they can work and what's the best way to use a billboard depending on your budget. When you have millions of dollars, billboards will work just because it's a resource war. Right? It doesn't mean that the strategy on the billboards is particularly good.
I think that's a separate issue, though, that billboards that we've seen in the States are some of the worst marketing we've ever seen. But the billboard as a medium is a strong medium.
And your point is what we're conveying to people, it's a subconscious, is that if you have a billboard up, what you're conveying to your potential target is that you have enough money to have a billboard up, which means you've kind of made it.
And you have a stable brand.
Right?
And that's a point that Rory Sutherland makes in Alchemy, which you bring up a lot. And it's a brilliant point, is that we're more likely to buy a Sony TV or a Huawei TV than some random brand on Amazon, because we know that a Huawei TV is going to be stable enough to maintain its warranty. And if we have problems with the product, we're going to be able to call them in a few years. There's a stability and a longevity to the brand name that's worth that $100 in price difference. And in billboard marketing, it plays on those same themes, where if you're a law firm that can afford billboard marketing, you're established, you've been around probably for many years, and you will continue to be around. So when you place the, if you're a surgeon, if you're a hospital, if you're a lawyer, if you're a realtor, and you're trying to pre-connect with the customer before the accident or the need happens, showing that longevity and brand through traditional marketing is strong.
Let me see if I can jump in with, because I have some legal experience in addition with the marketing, is law is traditionally known as the slowest adopter of new trends, new technology. And so there's a lot of very accomplished and skilled lawyers who are kind of bitter that they're not getting the clients they want. And it's because they didn't see the opportunity that a billboard presented, and they don't see the opportunity that digital. And so they resist it, as opposed to, and so then they're upset because people who are not their caliber had tremendous success because they adopted something that worked early.
Oh yeah.
And they're like,
especially with the change in the 70s where lawyers in the States could start to advertise in billboards. It allowed people to get ahead because of the advertising changes in that R versus case in Arizona.
And so they kind of look down their nose and say, oh, like these people had to do it. But then those people grew into very profitable behemoths. And it's stopping them from thinking strategically and saying, hey, look, just because I think these people are below me, it doesn't mean that I can't do things intelligently and move their own needle.
And you bring up a really interesting point and why this conversation is, complex and philosophical. Where a lot of small or medium-sized businesses can win in the services industries is going digital strategically, because service industries are slower to adopt and they tend to look inwards and resist change. A lot of the advancements in law, for example, or chiropractors or dentists, really is billboards and websites. And the law, like Morgan & Morgan, has put insane money in billboards, and it causes a lot of law firms to not be able to compete because it's a resource war. But Morgan & Morgan isn't winning on TikTok or Instagram. So if you have a limited budget, going on TikTok and Instagram is the first place to win. But what kind of that next stage of where you are a successful firm, you're not as big as the national players, and you have a pretty sizable marketing budget, and you're putting a lot of it into AdWords, is where you should be probably looking at a billboard. Like there's a time in your business where it makes sense to start going back to traditional because your digital is so strong, but your digital has to be strong for traditional to work.
And let's dig into the obstacles that high quality doctors or surgeons may have to billboard. I think you bring up Morgan & Morgan. It's almost like he deliberately did things that were so gauche and offensive to keep other lawyers from doing it. Because talk about that one ad that you saw.
Oh my gosh. So Morgan & Morgan has probably like the worst marketing agency giving them ad concepts. And the one that really stuck out the most is the name partner photoshopped onto a like ripped, almost like gigolo's body on an inflatable raft, and it's inauthentic. It's not him. Nobody thinks that it's him. And it's a part of a series of billboards where he's photoshopped into different roles that don't connect with where the consumer is at.
Well, and their one headline, size matters, like the sexual innuendos. Like it's not, but I'd step back because we can't judge what the marketing company is doing for them or who's behind it, or if it's an ego-driven thing or whatever the strategy is. But it's so kind of offensive to other professionals who look at that and say, what the heck is that? That it almost makes them, it would be an interesting strategy if the strategy was to stop the other professionals from going on a billboard. So they kind of own the billboard. Do you see what I mean? Like, because you look at it and you go, oh my God, look at that ad. That is so gauche and poor taste. And so I don't want to be attributed to that. So they don't go on the billboards, and they know the only way to be defeated would be authentic advertising on a billboard from a professional.
I think what you're saying is really interesting and is almost a byproduct of the poorly executed marketing, because the conversations that we're privy to from really some of the top lawyers that don't market is that they're so turned off by traditional marketing because of how gauche the Morgan & Morgan ads are. But I don't think that's the Morgan & Morgan strategy. I think for them is their consumer is just, it's so generic. It's so like the bottom of the barrel, like random kind of anybody that gets into an accident, that the message is just,
like the size generic. Of your bicep helps you get a better settlement.
It makes
like
no sense.
It makes no sense. But it's at a psychological level, it kind of makes sense maybe to the average citizen driving down the road, because it sticks. Size matters.
It sticks, but it's for someone that isn't questioning, right? So it's for someone that's not questioning the role that the lawyer pays. They're not going to the second and third or fourth order of thinking. Like, it's just enough for them to have so many billboards that their name sticks. Like, they're using more of like the CPG strategy, where if you just see Bounty 1,000 times, you'll just buy Bounty. And Morgan & Morgan has such a high recall because they're in every single market, and they spend so much money on traditional advertising that if an accident happens, doesn't matter what the message is, you just first think Morgan & Morgan. But why I hate it is that it allows lawyers that are good at what they do to be sold a poor strategy for their billboard marketing, because it's not as bad as Morgan & Morgan, but it's not good. And they don't have the resources to compete with Morgan & Morgan, and they're just burning cash.
But I wonder, and it might be getting too intellectual here, but it could be genius marketing, because the audacity of the ad, the ridiculousness of the ad makes people talk about it. But the latent effect is that they just know Morgan & Morgan is in personal injury. You know what I mean? So by being because we're an attention economy, it's hard to get people's attention. So if you say size matters, people are like, I can't believe they said size matters. But then Morgan & Morgan is now buried in their neural system so that they think of it as opposed to if they just spent Morgan & Morgan with something that wasn't controversial. What do you think of that?
I disagree. I think there's a lot of false attribution that is applied to Morgan & Morgan's marketing because they have so much money. And I would compare it to the Canadian equivalent, which is the Diamond and Diamond. And their whole tagline is like, nothing's tougher than a diamond. But their marketing isn't good objectively. And I've known smart people that are, that I'm shocked that after they got into an accident, they called Diamond and Diamond, and I've asked them why. And it's purely because it's top of mind, right? Like there is something to brand recall and how many times you see something. And Morgan & Morgan is at a point where, like, to your point, it actually really doesn't matter what they do. Like, it can be as bad as like photoshopping yourself on a ripped AI model on a life raft in a pool, and it still works because they've entered into every single market, and they spend so much that they kill other businesses that are well-intentioned. And I've seen this in markets, especially Florida. Like, they've intentionally driven the price of AdWords so high that the average business owner can't afford. They're just bidding on everything, every law firm's name, so that no matter who comes in, nobody can afford to compete with them. And
that's where guerrilla marketing comes in. That if you're a professional, you need to educate your future customer in terms of what are the criteria, but you're not going to get to know them competing on their battlefield. You have to compete on a different battlefield, which is why you talk about TikTok, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram in order to get your message to people a different way.
And also just going back to simple, right? Like, authenticity matters. Understanding that the customer is the hero matters. When the customer has gone and has been through a traumatic, life-altering event, which is the only time you hire a lawyer,
a personal injury lawyer,
or in most law, you want the customer wants to get their path back to where they were before the accident. So the lawyer's job is to just help them be a guide, help them be the right person for the job that's going to get them to a place of parity, or at least
the lawyer guides the hero on their journey. They're the Yoda.
That takes
and the Luke Skywalker to where Luke Skywalker had something bad happen to him. He had a guide to take him there. But there's so much egoic focus in legal advertising and marketing.
Professional services, period. But you see it a lot in legal marketing, and you see it a lot in legal billboards. So if you're trying to learn and to try to beat them in a guerrilla strategy, it's understanding that the customer is the hero. Connecting through storytelling and authentic messaging, digital, will work for pennies on the dollar.
But then when you're getting better, where we encounter a problem where, okay, we've got a lawyer or a professional that should get a billboard. It could make sense if it's done well. And they have such resistance because of
Morgan & Morgan,
or other bad billboards. But I think what we're trying to educate people on is, like, you can't swipe away from a billboard.
No.
So if there's a billboard on a highway and you drive it every day and there's a traffic jam, people are going to see that billboard and they can't swipe past it to another video, right?
Well, that's like a big thing why I really advocate for traditional billboards. Once a business is at a point where it makes sense to spend on out-of-house marketing, is for that exact reason. But the other reason is Google AdWords is cash burning. Like all of your money you're putting into is a bidding model. So once that bid has happened, and whether or not they click on your ad, or if they clicked on your ad and you spent that money and they decided not to convert, that money is gone.
And this is applicable
Whereas
to
a
lawyers.
billboard is a future investment. So the billboard works for people who are ready to convert now, but it's also priming people on your brand for that brand equity later. So it's a better use of investment dollars, especially if a Morgan & Morgan is in your territory, because you're not probably going to be able to compete with them on spend.
Yeah. And this is applicable to realtors, lawyers, accountants, doctors. The need to be seen, but what I think we say on the billboards is, don't put too much information there. Like, you just want your name to be subconsciously recognized so that you're elevated to a status of, we are a billboard advertiser. And then one message that can get their attention when they're there, which is maybe it's time for a second opinion, or
microscripts.
Like a strong microscript and your name. That's it. Not like this crazy nonsense things or giant pictures of yourself.
But the pictures of yourself doesn't bother me per se, because a photo, it does create a connection with the customer, and it does raise your status.
But better be a good photo.
But the one that I would say is, one thing that I would say is, you have to have a strong digital presence. No one is driving by on the freeway and they're like writing down your number. The next step is a Google search. So you have to have good reviews. You have to have a good website that's mobile friendly, that's modern, that is scannable. Like, scannability is super important. It doesn't have stock photography. You have to have a social media page, especially Instagram and TikTok, that are educational, that's showing your humanness, because your consult starts before the consult. So if you're putting that money into a billboard, you got to make sure that your second level of research verifies that you're the right person for the job. And a lot of law firms will spend big money on websites that are paperweights, aren't effective, aren't actually designed to convert, do not tell a story. But then they don't also realize that Instagram is your second website. So you Google first, you check out the website, and then people will check you out on social media. And that's where it's super important that you're investing month over month in a strong strategic strategy, because together, that's how you're going to win and beat a Morgan & Morgan.
And I wanted to wrap up. When you talk SEO, people have to be aware that the way that you sell your business product is the way marketing agencies will sell theirs. So if somebody is an SEO company, they're going to sit down with you and convince you that SEO is the way to do it. But for anybody who's got a few years under their belt, the old days in Google, you'd have 2 lines of advertising and then organic results. Now when I do a Google search, half to 3/4 of the page is paid advertising.
Yeah.
Nobody ever goes to a second page. So your organic search capability doesn't matter. They're pretending to sell you on that, but really it's just who's buying the ad word more. And so all of these agencies are doing is selling you a product they can do because you have money, right? It's not really a strategy for everybody. So be aware that SEO companies are selling you something that I think is going the way of the dinosaur a little bit more, because people are searching on the platforms you talk about.
Well, yeah, searchability on TikTok and Instagram are huge. The role SEO and AdWords plays, it's such a slippery slope, because it depends on the market that you're in and what it's worth to you as a business. And these are all, if we're using the example of lawyers, like, you have to look at the details for each case before you provide expertise. And the marketing and the strategy for your business is mission critical. So hiring and aligning with the right strategic agency that is going to give you unbiased opinions of services that they don't sell is super important, because you're right. If you go to a pencil company, they're going to sell you pencils. And you need to actually be aware of it's going to be the biggest impact for your brand. And it changes, for every single business.